So in this section, it's a little break from what we've been doing, which has been focusing on personalities, right? Um, I had, I went to a lot of discussion about characters like Thomas Jefferson, Daniel Shays, and we just went over a very thorough, although not totally complete, coverage of Andrew Jackson. And I've been kind of really working through a nice chronological line. When we did the an Intimate Revolution section from Howard Zinn, we had a little break from that strict chronology and focusing on just one particular person and the topic of women in American history, kind of going through the timelines of what we're covering in this course was accomplished. And so, kind of in that vein, this is where I'm going to be switching gears into for a moment, where instead of focusing on particular personalities, we're going to talk about the economic status of America within the time period in which we're covering in this class. So, I'm going to kind of do an overview briefly of aspects of American life in the economic sphere. And that's also going to be discussed within some of the points in Howard Zinn's text and what you see in the textbook. Now, I want to point something out. There's a trend in history among historians to try to minimize great man history, focusing on someone like Andrew Jackson, and looking at the economic conditions that would make an America that we see at the time of Jackson, and put him into context of all these other forces, and somehow downplay him as an agent of movement in history, and actually look at a wider range of issues. I like this approach a lot, mainly, but then there's this other extreme to kind of downplay the role of personalities in history, and I think that that's the other extreme to it. This role of looking at economics as a focus on culture is a Marxist approach to history, okay? And I'm kind of actually giving you guys some grad school level understanding about how historians look at things. Because Karl Marx, remember, Karl, and I think I did discuss this in one of my first lectures, but I just want to make this point that Karl Marx wasn't just a revolutionary advocating for communism, which is controversial. And you're going to, by the way, you're going to notice we're going to talk about him directly during the time of the Civil War. And so I'm looking forward to surprising you with that, because many people don't realize that Karl Marx had a lot of thoughts about the U.S. Civil War, and that was on his radar in a very literary kind of way. But in any case, he also was a person who had a theory about human existence, and his focus was on economic relations, and he saw the economy as a way to create culture in maybe ways that you wouldn't think about. Okay, right? So, for example, when you see all these teenagers texting on the internet, Twitter, I'll forget just teenagers, everybody, right? We don't necessarily see that our social life is completely transforming. I mean, just take, for instance, dating. Many of my single friends are on things like Tinder, OkCupid, Plenty of Fish, or they pay for eHarmony, and this is a completely new way of courting, right? Some for mere carnal pleasure, and others looking for substantial relationships, and some people have even been married through such technological arrangements. Now, I don't want to go off on this too much and lose track. What I'm just trying to point out is that there is something to what Karl Marx is saying that I think that even many politically conservative historians who don't advocate the Communist Revolution of Karl Marx, see that there's something to looking at the economy in terms of culture and the relationship that it has to things like racism. Okay, so keep that in mind. I'm not going to try to talk about this too much, but I want you to pay attention to that. And also you can notice, as you're reading historians, what they're focusing on, you're looking at the way that they're taking their perspective into this, and you can buy into it or not, but there is a methodology behind the way different historians tackle looking at things. So here's us looking into a certain aspect of American culture. And economy is big because one of the draws that America has always had is not just religious freedom, which it really became viewed as, but for economic opportunities. This was seen as a place where you can go from being poor to rich, and we're going to talk a lot about that as well, myth and reality. Okay, so just some brief overviews. During a War of 1812, the United States was essentially an agrarian nation, meaning farming, folks that farm, okay, had local economies. Then the Northwest and the Northeast rapidly developed into large cities, commercial farming, and manufacturing, okay? And so keep in mind, this is something that's important too. When we, and this is now me not like attacking a conservative person's position, but sometimes we look to our leaders and our thinkers of different times in the past who addressed what they thought America needed to do or should be. We remember Thomas Jefferson didn't want a big urban center. He liked the farm world, okay? But things changed fast. So, the thing that I always want to remind people is that, when we look at the thinkers of these times, we have to remember that they were different times. And I don't mean like being a relativist on morals. I'm talking about to understanding that the economic conditions, the numbers of people, and all these different factors weighed in, and many people made ideas that may have been the wisest ideas of the time, but under a very different set of conditions, a very different United States, if you understand what I'm saying, okay? So, the American population from the time period I'm just going to cover up 1820 to 1840. In this time period, there was a dramatic increase concentrated in industrial centers of the Northwest and the Northeast. So one figure has approximately about 4 million in 1790, okay? Not long after the Revolution, right? By 1840, 17 million. We're talking about, in less than a century, more than tripling the population, right? That's something to consider. Now, what's interesting about this is the public health improved. Often when you have a major increase of a population, that can be stifled due to living conditions. But there was also something to be said about, a better success of birth rates as well, and the children being able to live through having enough food and so forth and care. Okay, so that's just something to point out, that growth. I have the same picture here in this. So New York grew in this time period between 1840 and 1860 now. Okay, and we're talking about immigration. A little over 300,000 to 800, a little over 800,000. Again, major growth. Philadelphia, a little over 200,000 to leaping into 600,000. So between 1840 and 1850, more than 1.5 million Europeans moved to America. Okay, that's it's a lot. And no doubt many of us have great grandparents. Well, I'm 41, and I have one branch of my family claims to go back to the Mayflower. I think I mentioned that, and I believe it. just the way we are on that side of the family feels very Mayflowerish. But many of my other relatives came somewhere around this time frame, or a little after, from Europe as well. And I think this is a common story. We all share a lot of similarities. Many of us do. So in 1850, the 23 million, about 10% were foreign born. Now, I mean, that's a good chunk. Not massive, but a good chunk, right? And there's some things we have to address about that. These newcomers, okay? And I'm going to stop this first lecture here because this is a really important and very timely discussion to take place right now. So I will end where we were at, and we'll then move into this section.